Tame a wild Komodo dragon, and $500 million will be yours.
The billionaire mocked, but what he didn't expect was a humble mountain man, armed not with force, but with patience and compassion, to step forward into the impossible. Stay tuned to witness the breathtaking moment when everything you thought about power is turned upside down. Hi, dearest viewer. If you're enjoying this story, a quick like or subscribe would be such a blessing. It helps me share more heartfelt stories with you. And if you don't mind, tell me where you're watching from. I read every single comment with a smile. Now, let us get back to this story. Damon West stood in front of the cameras, his eyes as cold and calculating as ever. A self-made billionaire, he had built an empire that spanned continents, and yet, something was missing. For all his power, wealth, and status, Damon craved something more, something that money could not buy. He was tired of the predictable, tired of conquering corporate landscapes and markets. Now, Damon sought a different kind of victory. The cameras flashed, and his voice echoed across the world, his words carrying a challenge so bold it was almost unthinkable. Tame a wild Komodo dragon, and $500 million will be yours. The words hung in the air, each syllable cutting through the silence like a sharp knife. The Komodo dragon, the apex predator of the island, feared for its venomous bite and brutal strength, was the most dangerous animal in the world. For most, it was a myth, a creature of legend. But Damon, always the provocateur, turned it into a prize. A challenge so absurd, so dangerous, that only the boldest would dare to attempt it. The announcement sent shockwaves through the media. Headlines blared across the world, with people questioning whether it was a publicity stunt or a genuine challenge. Experts and animal lovers weighed in, claiming that taming such a beast was impossible, suicide, even. But Damon wasn't interested in the opinions of experts. This wasn't about taming nature, it was about proving that there was no force in the world too powerful for him to control. Damon was already known for his unshakable confidence. But this challenge? This was something else entirely. He was seeking validation, not from the boardroom or the millions in his bank account, but from something deeper. He wanted to prove that not even the wildest creature, the most primal force of nature, could stand against him. He craved the world's admiration and respect, but above all, he needed to prove to himself that nothing was beyond his grasp. Hassan had heard the whispers of the challenge long before it reached the village elders. It had traveled like wildfire from one end of the earth to the other, carried by news and media, through whispers and debates. The challenge Damon West had set, tame a wild Komodo dragon, and $500 million will be yours, was not one that many would ignore. For most, it was a ridiculous stunt, a game for those with too much money and not enough sense. But for Hassan, it wasn't about the money, it was about something deeper. Hassan stood at the edge of the mountain village where he had spent most of his life, gazing at the horizon, the towering peaks stretching into the sky. The wind howled through the narrow valleys, rustling the leaves of the ancient trees. He had always found comfort in the wilderness. The mountains had been both his home and his teacher. His life, shaped by nature's indifference to human struggles, had taught him that true strength did not lie in domination, but in respect. And when he had heard about Damon West's challenge, Hassan had not thought of the sum of money offered, but of the opportunity to demonstrate something greater, a philosophy of life rooted in compassion. The dragon, fierce, intamable, deadly, was considered by most to be an impossible force to reckon with. But Hassan had never been one to shy away from impossible challenges. He had lived through countless hardships in his mountain village, the harshness of life forging in him a resilience that had not come from brute strength, but from patience, humility, and an understanding of the natural world around him. Animals, like people, could be tamed not with force, but with empathy. They were not so different from humans. After all, they too had hearts that could be reached, if one knew how to listen. Hassan had always known what it meant to fight for survival. Growing up in the mountain village, he was no stranger to the relentless demands of nature. His earliest memories were of the towering, snow-capped peaks that seemed to watch over him like silent sentinels. The mountain was both a source of sustenance and a reminder of life's fragility. His parents had passed away when he was young, leaving him to care for his younger siblings. Life had been unforgiving, and yet, it had taught him lessons that most people would never learn. The harshness of the mountains had given him more than just physical strength. It had given him insight into the natural world, and the creatures that lived within it. Hassan had always believed that the greatest power came not from conquering the wild, but from coexisting with it. He had tamed the most unruly of animals by understanding them, by learning to respect their nature and boundaries. And so, when he heard of Damon West's challenge, he knew that this was an opportunity to prove something not to the world, but to himself. While others would see the Komodo dragon as a beast to conquer, Hassan saw it as a living, breathing creature worthy of respect. He believed that compassion could bridge the gap between man and nature, even between the most dangerous forces on Earth. To tame the dragon, to show that love and understanding were mightier than fear and control, this was his true goal. The day Hassan heard about the challenge, he had been sitting in the dimly lit corner of the village inn. A worn map spread across the table before him. The innkeeper had turned on the television to a news broadcast, the words Komodo Dragon Challenge flashing across the screen. Hassan hadn't thought much of it at first, but then he had heard the part about the $500 million. That was when his thoughts began to turn. It was not the money that drew him in. Hassan had never been driven by wealth. He had lived his entire life with little more than the clothes on his back, the food he hunted, and the simple joys of his mountain home. What mattered most to him was the feeling of peace that came from working with nature, of understanding the creatures that shared the land with him. He knew how to move quietly through the forest, how to build shelter from the elements, how to live in harmony with the earth. His life had been one of survival, not just in the physical sense, but in a deeper, spiritual way, learning the language of the land, the language of animals. When he heard about Damon's challenge, Hassan saw something in it that no one else seemed to understand, the chance to prove that strength was not something you could hold in your hand, that true power did not lie in brute force. It came from an understanding of the world around you, from a deep respect for its creatures and its rhythms. Hassan didn't believe in domination. He believed in connection, and he believed that even the most fearsome beast could be approached with a heart full of respect. The idea that a man like Damon West, a billionaire with everything but the world's respect, would offer a challenge like this stirred something deep in Hassan's chest. This was the ultimate test, not just for survival, but for the soul. And Hassan, with his humble upbringing and his heart rooted in the earth, knew he could answer the call in a way that no one else could. The media circus surrounding the challenge had drawn every kind of spectator, those eager to see a spectacle, those eager to see failure, and those who saw Damon's challenge as an absurd stunt. Damon West had always been an enigmatic figure, his wealth amassed through ruthless deals and a sharp mind. But his challenge to tame the Komodo dragon went beyond anything anyone had expected. When Damon first heard about Hassan, the humble mountain man from the remote village, he couldn't help but laugh. Who was this man with no wealth, no status, and no experience taming wild creatures? Hassan was nothing more than a joke to Damon, a mere blip in the spectacle he had created. Damon scoffed at the idea that someone like him, a man who had never even seen a Komodo dragon up close, could succeed where true experts had failed. To Damon, Hassan's chances were non-existent. The challenge was his, and anyone who attempted to tame the dragon was destined to fail. He couldn't fathom that someone like Hassan could possess the strength he had taken so long to cultivate. Through sheer force and intellect, Damon, watched with interest as Hassan made his way toward the island where the dragons roam freely. He knew that the media would be captivated by the sight of this mountain man stepping onto the same stage as the world's most powerful billionaire. But Damon's confidence never wavered. He was certain that the challenge would be over before it began. Hassan, with his lack of resources and expertise, was no match for the dragon nor for him. The day Hassan set foot on the island, the air was thick with anticipation. The media was already there, cameras aimed at every movement. They were ready for the spectacle, ready to see a failure unfold in front of their eyes. Damon stood at the edge of the arena, his arms crossed, watching the cameras that recorded every moment of the drama. He was confident that Hassan would fail. The dragon, after all, was not something that could be tamed. It was a living force of nature, unstoppable, dangerous, and untamable. But Hassan, emboldened by the media frenzy or the expectations placed on him, stood still as the island's wind howled around him. To him, this was not a contest of strength. It was a contest of hearts. He had no weapons, no special training. He had only his understanding, his patience, and the bond he had forged with nature throughout his life. As he approached the dragon, Hassan knew that this wasn't just about survival. It was about connection. The dragon, waiting in the arena, was a force of nature in its own right. Its dark eyes gleamed with predatory intensity, its massive frame a formidable presence. But Hassan did not hesitate. He knew what he was about to do. He would not fight the beast. He would meet it with respect, with understanding, and with the compassion he had always shown to creatures in the wild. As Hassan walked toward the dragon, Damon smirked. This is going to be over before it even starts. His voice dripping with arrogance. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, ready for the spectacle to unfold. But what he didn't know was that this was no ordinary man. This was a man who understood nature in a way he never could. This was the moment when everything would change, and the world would witness something it had never seen before. The dragon would not be tamed by force. It would be tamed by something far more powerful. And so, the stage was set. The challenge was underway, and neither Damon nor Hassan knew what the outcome would be. But the true test had only just begun. The salty air of the island bit at Hassan's skin as he stepped onto the barren soil, the vastness of the wilderness stretching before him. The wind carried with it the scent of earth and decay, the untamed breath of nature itself. The jagged peaks of the island's mountains loomed in the distance, their ancient presence like silent guardians watching over the land. Hassan's heart beat steadily, his senses sharpened by the serenity of the moment. Despite the terrifying ordeal he was about to face in front of him, the Komodo dragon stood tall, its massive body coiled with raw power, every muscle taut with latent energy. It was a creature that had ruled this land for centuries, its lethal bite and venomous strike making it one of the most fearsome predators alive. The creature's scales gleamed in the harsh sunlight, shimmering like armor forged in the fires of ancient conflict. Its dark, calculating eyes locked onto Hassan the moment he entered its territory. The dragon's nostrils flared, tasting the air for any sign of weakness. Hassan didn't flinch. He didn't look away. He stood there, tall and unyielding, his body rooted in the soil, as if he too were a part of the island itself. He had spent his life in the wilderness, learning the language of the earth, the rhythm of the winds, the pulse of every living creature. But never had he faced something as formidable as this apex predator, a symbol of the raw and tame power of nature. Still, his calmness was unwavering. His gaze was steady as he locked eyes with the Komodo dragon. The dragon hissed, a low, chilling sound that echoed across the arena. It was a warning, a declaration of its dominance, and yet Hassan remained still, his heart beat steadily, his breath even. In that moment, he understood the dragon's power, but more than that, he understood its vulnerability. The dragon, like all creatures, was driven by instinct, by the need to protect itself and its territory, but it, too, was capable of being reached if one could speak its language. The crowd held its breath, their eyes wide with anticipation. They had all gathered here to witness the impossible, to watch as Damon West, the billionaire, offered $500 million to anyone who could tame a wild Komodo dragon. The world watched, waiting for the spectacle to unfold, eager to see the dragon's fury unleashed. Damon stood at the edge of the arena, arms crossed, a smug smile tugging at the corner of his lips. He had seen it all, the boardroom battles, the cutthroat world of business, but this was something different. And yet, he was confident, sure that this challenge would be no different from any of the others he had conquered. No one could tame the Komodo dragon. No one. That is, except him. And he was ready to prove it. But as Hassan stood before the beast, Damon's confidence began to waver. He watched as the mountain man, without hesitation, faced the Komodo dragon. There was no fear in his eyes, no arrogance, no expectation of dominance. Hassan simply stood there, his presence quiet but powerful, as if he were speaking directly to the creature through the silence of the moment. It was clear to Damon that Hassan was not here to conquer the dragon. Hassan, unlike him, was not interested in domination or control. He was here to understand. He was here to show the world that strength did not lie in force, but in the quiet power of respect and compassion. And in that moment, Damon felt a strange stir of doubt, a crack in the wall of his unshakable arrogance. The dragon hissed again, its tail twitching, its muscles coiling in preparation for an attack. And then, without warning, the dragon lunged. The audience gasped as the dragon's massive body surged forward. Its jaws opened wide, exposing rows of razor-sharp teeth, glistening like daggers in the sun. The sound of its hiss was deafening, filling the air with a chilling promise of destruction. Hassan's eyes locked with the dragon's, his gaze unwavering, and in that instant, everything seemed to slow. The dragon's mouth closed in on him, its teeth just inches away from his face. The crowd held their breath, convinced that this would be the end for Hassan. But Hassan, his body still as stone, reacted in a way no one could have predicted. In one fluid motion, he ducked, rolling sideways, narrowly avoiding the dragon's jaws as they snapped shut with a thunderous crack. The dragon's momentum carried it forward, crashing to the ground with a violent thud. The air trembled with the force of the impact. For a brief moment, it seemed as though Hassan had miraculously escaped death. The crowd erupted in shock, their eyes wide in disbelief. Hassan, the humble mountain man, had just dodged the dragon's attack with an agility that defied explanation. Damon stood frozen, his smirk gone, replaced by a look of stunned astonishment. This wasn't part of the plan. Hassan wasn't just surviving the challenge, he was outwitting the beast. The dragon, enraged by the failure to capture its prey, whipped its head around. Its dark eyes glowed with fury as it turned toward Hassan again. The ground shook with the force of its movements as the beast prepared for another strike. The dragon's tail flicked violently through the air, slamming into the earth with a crash, its claws scraping the rocky ground. Hassan didn't flinch, his breath steady, his mind calm. He assessed the dragon's movements, waiting for the right moment to react. The dragon was no longer just attacking, it was hunting. It had tasted blood, and it was determined to finish what it had started. The beast roared, its body rising up on its powerful legs, preparing to launch itself at Hassan once more. The dragon lunged again, this time with a ferocity that could shatter bones. Its jaws opened wide, closing in on Hassan like a guillotine. The audience's collective breath caught in their throats. The world seemed to stand still as the dragon's massive body hurtled toward Hassan, but Hassan, as calm as ever, reacted with speed and precision. In one breathtaking motion, he dove underneath the dragon's massive legs, sliding on the dusty ground like a shadow, narrowly avoiding the crushing weight of the creature's attack. The dragon's mouth snapped shut, its massive fangs just inches above his body. The audience gasped, their hearts in their throats. Hassan was not only surviving, he was navigating the danger, using his quick thinking and understanding of the creature's movements to stay one step ahead. The dragon, now disoriented, roared in frustration, twisting its body and thrashing its tail in the air. Hassan, breathing heavily but undeterred, rolled out from underneath the dragon's belly, emerging on the other side, completely unharmed. The world held its breath. For a moment, there was silence, deafening silence. The dragon, its fury mounting, turned in circles, trying to regain its balance. Its massive claws scraped the earth, digging deep into the soil as it scrambled to right itself. But Hassan was already on his feet, standing tall and focused. His eyes never left the dragon, his heart pounding, but his body calm and controlled. The dragon hissed one final time, its body coiled with aggression, its eyes blazing with fury. But Hassan did not move. He remained steady, his presence unwavering. The dragon, confused and frustrated, began to back away, its aggression subsiding. It was clear that the beast did not know what to make of this strange, calm figure before it. The audience was frozen, unable to comprehend what they had just witnessed. Damon, once confident that Hassan would fail, now stood in stunned silence. The Komodo dragon, disoriented and exhausted from its failed attempts to strike, retreated into the shadows. Its eyes still glared with defiance. But the beast had been subdued not by force, but by understanding. The island fell silent. Hassan stood there, breath steady, his chest rising and falling with the rhythm of his calm breath. He had done it. The dragon, once a symbol of untamable power, had retreated, humbled and defeated. The crowd slowly began to process what they had just witnessed, their shock giving way to awe. Damon stood motionless, his jaw clenched, his eyes locked on Hassan. The realization hit him like a wave. This challenge, this test of dominance, was not what he had expected. Hassan had done the impossible, but he had done it in a way Damon never could have imagined. Damon had sought to dominate, but Hassan had sought to understand, and in that understanding, he had won. The challenge was only just beginning. The air around Hassan seemed to quiet as he stood before the Komodo dragon, his breath slow, steady, and unhurried. His eyes locked with the dragon's, unblinking, as if the two were sharing a secret language, one of patience, respect, and understanding. There was no fear in his gaze, no desire to overpower the beast, only a calm certainty that the connection between them was possible. Hassan's stillness seemed to draw the dragon in, and with each second that passed, the mighty creature's wild aggression began to subside. With slow, deliberate movements, Hassan took a deep breath, grounding himself in the earth beneath him. The dragon's growl rumbled in the air, but Hassan did not flinch. Instead, he spoke softly, his voice steady and filled with calm, gentle power. "You're not a beast to be tamed by force," he said, his words carrying the weight of a lifetime spent in the mountains, learning the language of nature. "You are a creature of this earth, just as I am. We share this world, and we both have our place." The dragon's eyes flickered for a moment, as if listening, its nostrils flaring as it took in Hassan's scent. Hassan's heart was steady, his words deliberate, as though he were speaking to an old friend, not a deadly predator. "I know you are strong, mighty, and fierce," Hassan continued, his voice soft yet firm. "But strength is not only in the fight, it is in patience, in knowing when to stand your ground and when to step back. I see you, and I respect you. I don't want to fight you, only to understand." He lowered his hand slowly, not threatening, but offering peace. The dragon hissed low in its throat, unsure of this strange man who stood so calmly before it. But Hassan, ever patient, did not move. He continued to speak softly, his words filled with warmth. "We do not need to fear each other. I do not seek to hurt you, nor do you need to hurt me. We both have the power to choose how we act, how we live." He paused, his gaze softening. "I believe in you, in your strength, but I also believe in your heart." Hassan stood there, his heart calm, but his mind focused. The Komodo dragon towered before him, still tense, its eyes full of suspicion and untamed rage. Yet, Hassan felt a connection in the stillness between them, a shared understanding that words alone couldn't capture. He slowly took another step forward, his gaze unwavering, his voice soft but filled with sincerity. "I know you've been shaped by this land," Hassan said gently, his voice carrying a quiet respect. "The winds here, the heat of the sun, the scarcity of food, it's a harsh world for a creature like you. You are not just fierce because of your nature, but because of what the environment has made you. It has shaped your heart to be one of survival, not trust." "I see that." The dragon's eyes flickered, its head tilting slightly as though contemplating Hassan's words. Hassan's heart beat steadily as he continued, speaking to the dragon not as an enemy, but as a fellow being who had endured hardship. "You were born in a world that taught you to fight, to defend yourself at all costs." Hassan continued, taking another step closer. "The world around you is cruel, and you've had to survive by any means. But there is more to you than just survival. I can feel it. You're not just a weapon. You are a creature of strength and beauty." The dragon growled lowly, its massive chest rising and falling with each breath. It was a sound of confusion caught between the urge to strike and the strange calm that had settled in its mind. Hassan knew the dragon didn't understand fully, but it was listening, and that was enough. "The world around you has taught you to be this way," Hassan murmured, his words soft but filled with deep empathy. "The land, the loneliness, the constant need to fight for food and space, it's made you who you are. But it's not the only thing you can be." The dragon, still wary, lowered its head slightly, as if considering the weight of Hassan's words. Hassan took a deep breath, his heart full of compassion, knowing that this moment was fragile. He could feel the dragon's hesitation, the fear of being misunderstood, just as he had once feared the world's judgment of him when he was young. "The environment does shape us, doesn't it?" Hassan continued, his voice barely above a whisper now. "We are not born with hate, with rage. We are taught it by the world around us. You, like me, have had to fight for everything. You've had to defend yourself against the unknown, to trust no one because the world hasn't shown you kindness. But that doesn't mean it's too late for change, for you, and for me." Hassan paused, his words hanging in the air between them, the weight of his thoughts sinking deeper with each passing second. The Komodo dragon was still watching him intently, its massive form blocking out the sun as it loomed, powerful and dangerous. Yet Hassan didn't feel fear. He felt the quiet pulse of understanding, a bond between man and beast that transcended the violence of their world. "You are not just a killer," Hassan spoke softly, his hand inching closer to the dragon's head. "You are more than the environment that made you fight. The same way the mountains shaped me, this island shaped you. But we don't have to remain trapped by our circumstances. You can choose peace, just as I've learned to choose peace." The dragon's nostrils flared, but Hassan remained still, his presence a steady force of calm. The beast's wild gaze softened just a little, its defensive posture slowly lowering, as if it were considering something new, something Hassan had offered without fear or force. A chance to be more than what the world had made it. ***, you can still be the mighty creature you are," Hassan said, his voice barely more than a whisper. "You don't need to be alone in your strength. I am here. I am not your enemy. I am here to learn from you, and I ask you to trust me, as I trust you." The dragon's tail swished slowly, its eyes narrowing as if processing Hassan's words. It took a cautious step forward, its massive claws digging into the earth. It seemed to hesitate, unsure of the unfamiliar sensation it felt in the air, the softness of Hassan's approach, the quiet warmth of his heart reaching out across the space between them. Hassan's hand, trembling ever so slightly, reached out, palm open, not to demand, but to offer understanding. "You don't have to be alone in your strength," he whispered. "I am here, and I understand you." And in that moment, the dragon, its massive head low and cautious, allowed Hassan's hand to rest gently on its rough scales. The air, once charged with aggression, now hung still with an unspoken bond. The dragon, a creature of nature's most primal fury, had softened. It was no longer a terror of the wild but a fellow creature, seen and respected, sharing the same space. Hassan's heart swelled, not with triumph, but with something much deeper, compassion. He had not conquered the dragon, he had simply met it as an equal, and in return, the dragon had softened, recognizing the truth in Hassan's words. The dragon, once a living weapon of nature, now seemed uncertain. Its massive body, rippling with power, began to relax. Its tail, which had been thrashing only moments before in fury, stilled. The deep, guttural hisses softened into slower breaths, and for the first time in what felt like forever, the dragon's steely eyes, those cold, calculating eyes, began to shift. There was something in them now, something that had not been there when the challenge had begun: curiosity, hesitation. The crowd, who had been holding their collective breath since the first lunge of the dragon, now gasped in unison. They couldn't believe what they were witnessing. The beast that had been the symbol of untamable ferocity was softening. It was impossible, but the moment spoke for itself. Hassan remained still, his body poised like a quiet mountain, and the dragon, impossibly, inched forward. Hassan's hand slowly extended, palm open. The dragon, its giant form looming like a shadow, hesitated before moving closer, as though drawn by an invisible force. The ground beneath them trembled slightly with each of the dragon's massive steps, but Hassan did not move. He did not flinch, and the dragon, instead of attacking, gently placed its head against Hassan's outstretched hand. It was a moment so profound that time itself seemed to hold its breath. The dragon's rough, scaly skin brushed against Hassan's hand. The heat of its body was palpable, its breathing heavy but steady. For a moment, it felt as if the entire world had stopped, leaving only the two of them in that brief, tender interaction. And in that quiet, emotional instant, Hassan's hand gently patted the back of the Komodo dragon, a small but significant gesture of reassurance and acceptance. "You are not your rage," Hassan murmured, his hand making contact with the dragon's rough scales, gently resting on its side. "You are a creature of strength, yes, but also of vulnerability, and that is where true power lies, accepting that we are both fierce and gentle, both strong and vulnerable." For a long moment, the world stood still. The dragon, once the most fearsome of creatures, remained calm, its body still beside Hassan. The mighty beast, who had ruled the island with terror, now stood beside him as a fellow being, no longer a predator, but a creature at peace. Hassan had not tamed it with force. He had tamed it with understanding, with respect, with love. From the sidelines, Damon stood frozen, unable to look away. His arms, once crossed in confidence, now hung loosely at his sides. His jaw clenched as he watched Hassan interact with the dragon. The power and grace Hassan displayed were unlike anything Damon had anticipated. What he had thought would be a spectacle of control, his idea of strength had unfolded in a way that had shattered his expectations. Damon's mind raced. This wasn't the challenge he had set. It wasn't supposed to unfold like this. The dragon, untamable, fierce, was no longer a beast to be conquered. It was a creature that had found peace, not through force, but through understanding. And in that moment, Damon realized something he had never fully understood. True power wasn't about control. It wasn't about dominating the world. It was about connection. It was about understanding the nature of things and meeting them with compassion. For the first time, Damon's confidence cracked. He had always believed that his wealth and power were the ultimate forces. But now, watching Hassan with the dragon, he felt small. The billionaire, once so sure of his superiority, stood there humbled. Hassan had not only tamed the dragon, he had tamed Damon's very idea of what strength was. As Hassan stood beside the dragon, his hands still resting gently on its back, the moment of transformation was complete. The beast, once a terror of the wild, now stood peacefully beside him, its eyes no longer filled with rage, but with a quiet understanding. And Hassan? He stood not as a conqueror, but as a creature who knew the true meaning of power. Damon's jaw remained clenched, his thoughts racing, but no words came. His challenge had been turned on its head. The $500 million, the fame, the glory, none of it mattered now. What had just transpired before him was something far more valuable than wealth. It was a lesson in humility, in respect, and in the strength of compassion. The island fell silent as Hassan stood beside the dragon, and Damon, standing off to the side, finally understood. The true test was never about conquering nature. It was about learning to live with it. And Hassan, the humble mountain man, had shown the world that there was nothing more powerful than the strength of the heart. The audience stood frozen, their eyes wide with disbelief. The beast, the terrifying, untamable Komodo dragon, was no longer a predator. It was a creature, a living being that had been touched by something far more powerful than fear. The crowd's silence was broken only by the sound of their collective exhale, a sound of astonishment and awe. They had all expected blood, violence, an act of domination, but instead, they had witnessed the birth of an unexpected connection, one built on understanding, patience, and respect. Hassan, the man with no wealth, no fame, no title, this unassuming mountain man, was doing what no one else could. He wasn't fighting the dragon. He wasn't attempting to force it into submission. No, Hassan was doing something far more difficult. He was understanding the dragon. He had met it with the same quiet strength that had seen him through the harshest of his life's battles, a strength born not from force, but from something deeper. Damon's jaw clenched as he watched the scene before him. The dragon, the beast that had been regarded as the ultimate symbol of untamed power, was no longer a threat. Instead, it was a creature that, for the first time, seemed to relax, to submit not out of fear, but out of the deep connection forged between it and Hassan. Damon had expected to witness a show of brute strength, a test of dominance, What he didn't expect was for Hassan to tame the dragon not with violence, but with something much more powerful: empathy. Damon's mind raced. This was not how it was supposed to happen. This wasn't the kind of victory he had envisioned when he announced the challenge. He had thought that the only way to control something as wild as the Komodo dragon was to overpower it, to bend it to one's will. But Hassan had done the impossible. He hadn't tamed the beast with force. He had tamed it with understanding. The realization began to dawn on Damon, like the breaking of a storm. His vision of power had been flawed. His belief that control and domination were the keys to success shattered in a single moment. Hassan stood there, calm and unflinching, his hands still resting on the Komodo dragon's back, as the beast's hot breath slowed and softened. Hassan's quiet strength, grounded in compassion and understanding, had done what brute force could never achieve. He had shown the world and Damon that true power is not about control. It is about connection. It is about understanding and respecting the forces that seem untamable, recognizing the vulnerability that lies beneath every fearsome exterior. For the first time in his life, Damon began to understand that real power lay not in imposing one's will, but in learning to connect with the world in a deeper, more meaningful way. He had spent his life accumulating wealth, amassing influence, and controlling every aspect of his empire, but none of that had brought him peace. None of that had taught him the lesson Hassan had just revealed to the world: the true strength of the heart, the ability to empathize with others, and the courage to approach even the wildest creatures with compassion. That was where real power lay. Damon looked at Hassan, his expression softening. The mountain man, with his quiet humility and steady presence, had just demonstrated a lesson that Damon could never have learned from the boardroom or the millions of dollars he controlled. The lesson wasn't about taming nature, it was about learning to live with it, to respect it, and to understand its power without trying to dominate it. Hassan had tamed the dragon, yes, but he had also tamed Damon's heart. The dragon, no longer a threat, was now a companion of sorts, its massive form resting beside Hassan in a moment of peaceful coexistence. The $500 million, the wealth, the fame, none of it mattered now. What mattered was what he had witnessed, what he had learned. The true power of the challenge was never about money. It was about the realization that even the most fearsome force in the world could be tamed, not through domination, but through connection. The lesson that Damon had never understood: true strength lies in compassion, not control. As the dragon and Hassan stood there in quiet harmony, Damon's world shifted. He had come to prove his power, but what he had learned was far more valuable. The challenge was never about who could control the wild. It was about understanding it. And for the first time, Damon knew that he had much to learn. Hassan had tamed the dragon, but it wasn't just a beast that had been tamed. Damon's pride, his arrogance, and his perception of power had been broken as well. If Hassan's journey of compassion and strength moved you, if you believe that understanding and empathy are the true forces that can change the world, then take a moment to share this story with others. Let's spread the message that real power comes from connection, not domination. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories that challenge our perception of strength and teach us the true value of compassion. Together, let's make the world a kinder, more understanding place. Thank you for watching.